Well, we're at the Skyland Pines Country Club for a banquet and a big evening for the ECOPA, East Central Ohio Pilots Association. And I got that right.
You
and
got
this
that right.
dapper-looking gentleman standing next to me is Lou Luttrell, and he's the new president of the ECOPA. Congratulations, Lou.
Thank you, Ernie.
And
Thank you very much.
yeah, we're trying to get him to do a soft shoe. He said, absolutely not. He said, he's booked next week, so he's going to do that.
Right.
Okay. You don't want to give away your act.
No, we got to keep that secret. So.
Okay. Now, tell us your background in flying, Lou.
Background in flying, I've been flying about 26 years now. Started with the Piper Archer, kept going on up through Barons. Currently have an RV6A, and a TBM.
You got a TBM?
Yes.
I mean, not the old World War II TBM.
No, this is it's the new one, TBM 850. Just had it about a year ago.
Okay, who makes that again?
They're made by Sakala, made in France.
Well, you've got your own Air Force now.
Just about. Me and the French.
And if they don't buy one of your motorhomes, what do? Bomb and strafe them?
Well, no, I can't do that.
Until you actually.
But I sure hope they do buy some so I can put some fuel in those.
Boy. Well, Lou, what are your plans for this year for the ECOPA?
We've got a lot of great things happening, Ernie. It's our 50th anniversary coming up this year, which is fantastic, I think, for any association. We are supporting the Angel Flight Foundation. We donate money to them, and we also have some pilots that do some mission flights for them. That's one thing. We are starting a 501c3 now, so that'll help our association grow quite a bit. And we have our scholarship fund also.
The 501 is tax-free, tax-exempt?
That's correct. That'd be tax-free.
Okay, you fellows have gone through all of that now, and you've got it?
It's not approved. It's pending. It's sent in now, and we're waiting to get the final approval on it.
So if we want to make $1 million donation, we just get hold of you?
You can feel free to do it, yes.
Okay, gee, thanks. And what are some of the other programs you've got? What are you going to do tonight at this banquet?
Well, tonight, as you know, we have Captain First Officer Jeff Skiles that was on the U.S. Air that went down the Hudson River, Miracle on the Hudson. And we have Patrick Harton, who was the controller that worked him down. That's for starters for this year. We've got some great things coming up. We're starting some flyouts this year that we're going to have. Take some little overnight trips that everybody can partake in. That'll be a lot of fun for everyone.
Well, it looks like you got this outfit moving, and
well, yeah, it's we got a bunch of movers in here.
Good. Well, your 50th anniversary, that's great. That's kind of a record for an aviation organization.
Yes, I think it probably is for any organization. So
it is, because usually there's a couple shakers and movers, and then when they pass on, the organization finally just kind of drifts off and dies out.
Yeah. You see it happen all too often, I guess.
Okay, Lou, thanks for being with us, and we appreciate you.
Very much.
And don't bomb and strafe your customers, okay?
Okay, we won't.
Okay, sure enough. Okay, this mean-looking, tough guy standing next to me is Nick, and his dad is Chauncey, who's with us in the QBs. And Nick, you've served how many tours in Afghanistan?
Well, I was in Afghanistan once with the Special Forces. I went there one other time kind of as like a pre-deployment mission, but I did a full tour there with the Army Special Forces.
And were you in Iraq also? Or?
Yeah, I saw Iraq twice as a civilian and once wearing a Green Beret, so yeah, I've been to Iraq a couple times.
Green Beret, are they still using that, the Green Berets, or is it Rangers now?
No, it's still the Green Berets. It's definitely a time-honored tradition that we're proud to keep that legacy going. So yeah, it's a great outfit, the Special Forces.
How do they compare to the SEALs, or should I ask?
They've got a lot better. Well, the SEALs have a much better PR campaign. We definitely focus more on the training side, though. So
That was a very good answer, Nick.
a little inter-service rivalry.
Yeah, I see you've got the Army wings. Are you a helicopter pilot now?
Yeah, I am now. I did 10 years in Special Forces, and then kind of was climbing up the ranks where I was going to be commanding a desk, and said, you know what, why not just maximize the opportunity, go learn how to fly a helicopter. And so the old man had something to do with that too. So, it was definitely a neat opportunity to kind of follow in a little bit of his footsteps there.
So you actually finished the training. What are you doing now, and where are you?
Right now I'm on active duty. I'm actually still with the Ohio National Guard on active duty. I'm a Black Hawk pilot out of Columbus. I fly UH-60s, and my full-time pay the mortgage job is I'm the operations officer for recruiting for the state of Ohio.
So you're flying one of those things where the wing goes around and around like that?
That's right. We actually have a piece of our aircraft that moves faster than the aircraft itself. So.
Oh, great. Now, did you take fixed wing training too?
I have. Matter of fact, when I was in the instrument phase of the Army course, I saw some of the guys flying the Cessnas right there in a little local airport, so I pursued my private pilot's license through them. So I waited until I finished my Army training. That way I could get that commercial rotary wing instrument ticket, and then it was an easy private pilot add-on for airplane single engine land. So, but yeah, my wife and I still enjoy flying airplanes now, and especially with the cost of aviation and things, it's almost cheaper to rent an airplane and fly some places as opposed to buying an airline ticket. So
yeah, are you are you full-time in the Guard?
Yeah, right now I'm on an active duty status, so it's kind of a temporary thing for now, but yeah, for the time being, just wearing the uniform every day.
Okay, what's the next step? What's your next assignment?
We'll see. I'm keeping my options open. I love flying. I'll tell you, there's some great opportunities with guys once you get your minimum hours to go down to Fort Rucker and be an instructor pilot, and I would just love that. Go back down to Rucker and teach. That would be fantastic.
That's better than wading around in the jungle, isn't it?
That's true. Yeah. But you know what? I did have a very interesting reflection. Having spent 10 years in Special Forces and then coming over to aviation, it's kind of interesting to me how long it's been since I've had an MRE, one of those meals ready to eat, the Army rations. It's been quite a while since I've had one of those. I know when Napoleon said an Army travels on its stomach, I can certainly say that Army aviation travels on its stomach, because Carroll County's got the best pie, Cincinnati Lunken's got a great cheeseburger, and Parkersburg is a great place to get a club sandwich. So
you write all this down, Ray? Okay, Nick, thanks a lot. You mentioned MREs, but in my time it was C's and K's.
Oh, yeah.
Terrible. Hey, thanks a lot, Nick, and good luck to you.
Hey, thanks, sir. Nice meeting you guys.
Okay. Well, we've got another one of Chauncey's boys. What does he feed you guys? You're bigger than, both of you are bigger than Chauncey.
It's a lot of Wheaties.
A lot of Wheaties. Now, what are you doing now, Dan?
I'm still serving in the United States Army and the National Guard, and I work as a defense contractor, too, out of Columbus.
So you're still in the Guard, active duty, or as a defense? What's your full-time job now?
Well, my full-time job would be as a defense contractor, working for a civilian company, but I'm also a guardsman, a drilling reservist in the National Guard.
Okay, how many tours have you had?
Well, military deployments have had at least three big trips. Been to the Balkans and the Middle East, and the country starts with an A, Afghanistan. So been over there, and then my civilian employment also takes me overseas. So
you like to travel, then, don't you?
Yeah, see the world, right? That's
I guess
the adventure. So
yeah. What were you in when you did the deployments? What were you? Were you in the Rangers also?
Not the Rangers. It's United States Army Special Forces. So the 1st Special Forces Regiment, also known as the Green Berets. So how do you compare them to the SEALs? Besides, SEALs have a great PR outfit. Yeah, no comment.
No comment on that.
No, we love our brothers in blue, but there's definitely a rivalry there,
Oh yeah. Now what's your next deployment?
I'm not sure yet. We haven't heard of any trips coming up, but I'll go back overseas with my civilian employer. Probably by the end of the year, I'll head back overseas with my civilian employer. So.
Now, what are you going to do with all that money you make as a defense contractor?
Well, I'm getting married in September, so.
Oh, that's going to be the end of it right there. Now, what is your job as a defense contractor?
I work with it's a SOCOM project doing mobile technology repair. So I work with my fellow SF guys and SEALs and other special operations guys, providing technology support, whether it's welding, fabricating, or whether it's construction, whether it's night vision goggle repair, weapons repair. Our slogan is technical solutions to tactical problems, but it's pretty much providing those guys the kind of handyman support that they need. So.
That sounds like a great job. Are you involved in putting together these guys that hit not the guys, but the vehicles that hit the IEDs?
Well, I don't work for a company that builds those, but I mean, we work with the actual guys on the ground as far as what they need, as far as support. So usually if a vehicle over there, has a representative that works on it, but we provide any type of support that we can. So.
Okay, would it be okay to ask you, what's the toughest thing you've faced over there? The worst situation you've been in?
I'll tell you what, being in a combat environment and being in a situation where you lose friends, that's probably the hardest thing. I mean, you develop such a camaraderie with your fellow soldiers, and to be in a situation where either one of them gets hurt or one of them gets killed, it's hard. But you got to kick it in gears and complete the mission, and then when you get back home, you provide that support to either that soldier if they're still with us or their family members, and it's hard because you develop such close relationships with guys in your unit. And it's definitely hard to come home without them,
Oh yeah, it's hard to see those empty bunks, isn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot, Dan, for talking with us, and good luck to you.
Thank you.
This is a guy that is amazing, an FAA man, and he's talking to Darren out there, and I thought, all you FAA guys stick together. Yeah. And Patrick Harton, the guy who was the controller involved in the miracle landing on the Hudson. Patrick, welcome to our show, and can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Well, I've been a controller now for 13 years. Originally I was going to school for biochemistry, and when that wasn't working out, my dad, who was a controller, suggested, why don't you go into the same field? So I went to school for that, and actually it's been a great career, so can't complain.
You don't look nervous or strung out, which most of these guys are.
I hide it well.
Do you? Very good. Now, where are you based present?
I am at the New York TRACON, which is located in Westbury, Long Island.
And you in the center there? The TRACON Center?
It's similar to a center in the sense that we work a lot of airspace, but it's an approach control. So we take them about 60 miles out and take them to the airport.
And there's a lot of stress on that job. Is there as much or more than a controller in the tower?
I don't know. I've never worked in the tower, so I don't know if I can compare the stress between us and the tower, but I know it varies day by day. You have some days where you go home and your head is spinning. Then you have days that you go home and you're like, oh, that wasn't so bad.
Now, when you're in there, you're not on a straight 8 hours, so do you have time off when you're working?
Yeah, they give us breaks. We usually work about an hour for radar, and then get like a half-hour break, maybe 45 minutes for chow. This way it breaks it up because you can't handle being stressed for that long. You're working all these airplanes, your mind's constantly going. After about an hour, you start to fall behind a little bit. That's when the next guy comes in.
You look like you've weathered it very well.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
You hide it, you said, huh?
Yes, I do.
Okay, now here's a control tower story.
Okay.
At one of the control towers, the Akron Canton, it was fog right down to the ground. Mm-hmm. And the guys are sitting there not doing anything, and a voice booms in. Help, I'm on top. I'm flying a Cessna 120. I need help. And the controller puts his coffee cup down. He says, first thing, don't yell into the mic, into the radio. He says, who's got a radio? Does that really happen?
I haven't experienced that.
Okay. Now, how did you feel when you're doing this, talking these guys down?
Well, I was hyper-focused. I really wasn't thinking about much. Obviously, there was some underlying nerves because I could feel my heart beating through my chest, but I was just kind of suppressing that. I was just focusing on trying to find a solution to the problem, and the problem was they had no thrust and needed to land somewhere.
And you cleared out from MacArthur, was it?
I cleared out, well, originally departed from LaGuardia. I cleared LaGuardia first, then Teterboro, and I gave them the option to go to Newark next if, they got thrust back into the engines and could climb up a little bit. We could have done that.
Hey, when they finally landed in the water, what was your first thought?
I didn't think they made it. I didn't think it was pretty.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
That was that would be stress right there.
Yeah, it's a terrible day.
Well, Patrick, we're looking forward to your talk.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for being with us.
I appreciate it. Happy to be here.
When I struck a flock of birds during takeoff. And now, for the rest of the story, it is my honor to introduce First Officer Jeff Skiles on Flight 1549 and the FAA Air Traffic Controller, Patrick Harton, who communicated with and then watched Flight 1549 disappear from the radar. Ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Skiles and Patrick Harton.
Well, today Patrick and I are going to tell you a story. And it's a story that you've all participated in. I think most people in the world seem to think a lot more about this than I do after actually having been there. But we're going to tell you a little bit of a different story than what you saw on your television sets. Because that was largely concocted by TV producers. The story we're going to tell you is a real story because it's our story. And we're going to do that today by putting you on the jump seat. And like some of you that don't know anything about an airline cockpit are probably asking yourself, what's a jump seat? Well, between the captain and the first officer on every airliner, there's this little seat that folds out from the wall. And it's a very special place, and only very special people ever get to sit there. You have to be on a database with the Department of Homeland Security to be allowed on the jump seat of any airliner in this country. But today, we're going to put you on that jump seat by bringing you along with us and telling you our story. Now, as you sit there, to your left, you're looking at Captain Chesley Burnett Sullenberger III. That's quite a name. When we go on these trips, go on flights, we have these trip sheets that we print out. They tell you, everything about who's on the flight, the names of all the crew, your destinations, what time you have to be there, what time you have to get up in the morning. And I'm looking, as we're flying out to San Francisco earlier on this 4-day trip, I'm looking at this name that takes up the entire length of the space that's allowed for a name on the trip sheet. And I said, hey, Sully, that's quite a name you got there. And he said, yeah. And he says, I said, that must put a lot of pressure on a man to produce a Chesley Burnett Sullenberger IV. And he laughed and he said, that's why I adopted 2 girls. I didn't want to give anybody that name. Now, Sully grew up in Texas, and he learned how to fly as a teenager while he was going to high school. He later got an appointment to the Air Force Academy, and I actually had the pleasure of flying with one of his classmates after I went back to flying after this accident. He was telling me about this scrawny, obviously very tall, extremely skinny man that showed up with a bright red hair and a page boy haircut. He said he was the ugliest man he'd ever seen in his life. And that was Sully. He went there for 4 years and he graduated and went to fighter pilot training and flew F-4 Phantom fighters just after the Vietnam War. Upon graduating, he was hired, upon leaving the military service, he was hired by Pacific Southwest Airlines, which is one of the airlines that is later merged in to become what is now U.S. Airways. To your right is me, Jeff Skiles. I learned how to fly as a civilian pilot. I also learned how to fly as a teenager. Flight instructor while I went to college, and worked for a couple airlines. I was hired at U.S. Airways in 1986. I've been both a captain and a first officer at U.S. Airways. At the time of our accident, I was also head of business as a general contractor. So I was staying as a first officer because I could essentially pick my trips and when I wanted to fly, whereas as a captain, they would tell me when I had to fly and I couldn't run my other business. Now I find that people like to tell me where they were when they first saw the first pictures or heard the news. And I don't know where you were, but we're going to tell you where we were. Now, Sully and I had started our day not too far from here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, on a layover. And we flew down to Charlotte, switched airplanes, and went up to LaGuardia. And this is the last leg of our day. We're going to start up, we're going to fly from LaGuardia and go back to Charlotte, and we're going to be done. And the weather had been snowing and overcast earlier that day, but by this point it had started to clear up, and it was getting pretty nice. Now, as you join us on the jump seat, we have a full flight. 150 passengers are there to join us today. And at the gate, you're watching us accomplish our flows as we go through the cockpit in a very ordered pattern. Now, we verify the most important items by following a checklist. Start up our engines, we taxi away from the gate. Now, Sully's taxiing the airplane. It's my job to set the flaps for takeoff and input our weight and balance to get our proper speeds and set our controls. And then we run some more checklists in between us. This is the last day of a 4-day trip for us. And as I said, it's the last leg of this day. When we get done with this, we're going home. We're going to Charlotte, and I'm going back to Wisconsin. Sully's going to San Francisco, where he lives, and the flight attendants are going to Pittsburgh, to Winston, and Nashville. And I had just been released from training. I'd been flying a 737 in the Philadelphia base for the last 8 years, and I switched to the Airbus. And just the week before, I had completed my training, and this was my first line trip on the Airbus. Not only is it a new airplane for me, it's also my first trip with Sully. I'd never flown with him before. In fact, at the time, he'd worked there for 30 years, I'd worked there for 24. I don't even recall ever seeing the man before. But we can't depend on knowing the person that we fly with to act as a team. We have to use our training and our procedures so that we can act as a team with anybody that we sit down with from our very first takeoff. Now we're holding short of the runway. I'm flying, it just happens to be my leg. Normally you swap legs. Captain flies a leg, first officer flies a leg, and it just happens to be mine. We're clear to position and hold on the runway. Sully taxis it out, lines it up with the center line stripes. I put my feet up to hold the brakes, and he says, "Your aircraft." And I say, "My aircraft," in a very deliberate fashion. And that's how we establish who is actually flying the airplane at any given time. We're cleared for takeoff. I reach over and put the thrust levers 3 clicks up into the takeoff and go around detent. The engines start to accelerate. We go down the runway, we make our standard call-outs, 80, V1, rotate. I pull the side stick back because it's controlled by a little side stick controller like an F-16 with your right hand. And we leave the runway. Sully calls positive rate and I say gear up. 400 feet in the air, we roll to a heading of north, which is our departure heading, and we begin to accelerate. Now, what you just heard, we do the exact same way every single time we fly, because it's how we work as a team in the cockpit. Now, it's actually, by this point, turned out to be a nice day. The cold front has moved through, pushed all the clouds off to the east, and it seems like you could see forever as you're looking up the Hudson River. In fact, at this moment, and kind of violating, the sterile cockpit rule, Sully is just so taken with the picture that he looks up the river and he says, "What if you were the Hudson?" Which I thought was rather ironic because, 4 minutes from now, we'd be looking at it up close.
So my name's Patrick Harden. I've been in control of the New York TradeCon for 13 years now. The New York TradeCon, we don't actually work at the tower. I work the LaGuardia sector. So I work LaGuardia Airport. I also work Westchester, Denver, some other small airports over there. We're in the middle of Long Island. It's an unassuming white building in the middle of nowhere with a guard shack. They probably do that because I assume we're probably a terrorist target. So there's no markings. It doesn't say FAA, it doesn't say control tower, it doesn't say anything. What got me into it? My dad was controller. And I pretty much grew up at the TradeCon. We used to go there all the time. My brother and I used to play in the hallways. Back then, they were much more lenient about kids being in there. In fact, I even talked to an airplane when I think I was like 8. And I didn't meet the news then. But I've been around it my whole life, but I definitely did not want to follow my father's footsteps. I wanted to carve my own path, I wanted to do my own thing. So when it came time to go to college, I decided I was going to go into the science field. I wound up being a biochem major with maybe the hopes of being a doctor or something like that, which I probably had pretty good potential of doing, but I decided to join a fraternity instead. And my priorities shifted. So I'm 3 credits shy of graduating with this degree in biochemistry, and I have no idea what I'm going to do with it. I could go into research field, that's about it. I didn't have the grades to go to med school. So I'm like, I didn't know what I was going to do with my life at that point. And that's when my father suggested, why don't you look into doing air traffic control? And he managed to get me a job. It's kind of like an internship, but I worked for a contracting company for the FAA, and they handled the training for the new hires. So basically what I would do when the person comes in off the street and they're learning how to be a controller, a radar controller, they would sit at a scope, but it would be a computer-generated problem. So they'd have all these targets on the scope, but they're not actual airplanes. I pretended I was all the airplanes on another scope. So they would give me instructions, I would read it back, and then type it in, just like a pilot did. They tell me turn right hang 070, I would type in TL 070, select enter, the plane would turn that. So I remember watching these new hires come through, and I'm like, man, I think I'm better than these guys, and how much do they get paid? I think there might be something there. So that's when I made the decision. Back then you had to go to school for it. I think we have to go to school now too. The rules go back and forth, how to get hired as a controller. But that's when I made the decision to go to school for air traffic and become a controller. So I got picked up in 1999. That's when I got hired. And I went right to the TradeCon. I've been there ever since. I'm starting in the LaGuardia area. I'm in the LaGuardia area now. That particular day, January 15th, I remember I woke up. It was a normal day for me. My wife's a teacher. It was the middle of the week. So she got up, went to school. I was scheduled to work at 3 to 11, 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. So I was in no hurry. I was training for triathlon at the time. I was on this triathlon kick because my brother-in-law told me I'd never be able to finish one. So I had to prove him wrong. So I was training a lot. That day I was scheduled to run, I think, 60 minutes on the treadmill. Nothing major. It was a light day. But I had all the time. So I'm eating breakfast, and I got a call from work. They were short-staffed on the day shift. They asked if I would come in early for a 1 to 9 instead of working at 3 to 11. I was like, yeah, sure, why not? So I was like, okay, finish up breakfast real quick, go run the treadmill, shower, now I'm out to work. Now the interesting thing about that is because I went in for a 1 to 9, not a 3 to 11, that put me on the rotation where I was working departure when the flight took off. Because normally what would happen is I go in, I work, I get a short break, and then the 3 to 11s come in, they work, and they take a break. If I was working the 3 to 11, I would have gotten a break. I literally only took over the position like 5 minutes before the flight actually took off. So I came up break, sat on position, and it was a slow day. It was actually slower than normal. There wasn't much going on, which I'll be able to show you later when I play the radar replay. It was a very relaxing day up until it happened. But yeah, so it took off, normal departure, radar contact, climb maintain 15,000. I'm just waiting for him to hit his altitude before I can turn westbound. And from there, I'll let you go.
We're climbing out, we're raising our flaps, and we're accelerating. And at 3,000 feet, we're pitching over to start to accelerate to our 250 knot speed limit below 10,000, which is our final stage climb profile. And I'm still hand flying this airplane because I'm trying to get used to this side stick controller, because it's really, for an airline pilot, it's very strange, it's very sensitive. Anyway, so we're pitching the airplane over, and something caught my eye. And I look up, and slightly to my right, but still right ahead of this, right ahead of us is a line of birds. And they were far too close to maneuver around. And before I can say anything, I hear Sully say, "Birds." And that fast we were on top of them. They hitting the airplane, they sounded like flying through hail. There were multiple thuds as the birds ricocheted off our fuselage and off our wings. And two of them went through the core of each engine. And before we could recover and try to figure out what we had left and what the damage was, both engines immediately lose thrust. They make a very high whining sound and climb power, and at cruise you could barely hear them in an Airbus. And they just immediately the sound was just reduced to a hush. I remember the shock of it felt like having a bad cold. It felt like my head had suddenly swelled to twice its size and I'm looking at the world through a fog. We've got the nose up in the air, or our minimum maneuvering airspeed for this flap setting, and I could just feel the deceleration of the airplane. I'm trying to push the nose forward to keep the airspeed up, and Sully decides to take over flying the airplane at this point, which is his prerogative, he's the captain. And he says, "My aircraft." And I said, "Your aircraft." You want it, you got it. Now at this point, I've actually only had 4 engine failures in my airline pilot career, which is actually a lot for an airline pilot, believe it or not. But I did manage to double my total here in just one flight. At the time these particular engines were certified, the certification standards were such that they had to ingest a 4-pound bird at 200 knots of airspeed. But they only have to not catastrophically self-destruct, meaning they blow apart parts outside the engine cavity. They don't have to continue to run after ingesting a bird of that size. Now we've got the airplane in a glide. It's just over 200 knots of airspeed. We're losing 1,000 feet a minute, but we're only at 3,000 feet to start with. The right engine is turning at very low sub-idle RPM. The left engine is better. It's idling, but it's not producing any thrust. But that actually was fortunate because it was running a generator and a hydraulic pump for us, which was very important. Now I always thought that these were geese, just because when I saw them, the brief glimpse I had of them, they were just all flying in a line, perfectly spaced out the way Canada geese do, or are. But they later took the feathers and the DNA evidence from the engines and they sent them down to the Smithsonian Institute, because there are people down there, believe it or not, that can look at a feather and tell you not only what bird it came off of, but exactly where on the bird it came off of. And they were positively identified as Canada geese. And I'm careful to say Canada geese, because I used to say Canadian geese. I didn't really know there was a difference, and I was at this air safety forum down in Dallas, as a matter of fact, and I said Canadian geese, and afterwards there were a couple of Air Canada pilots there, and they came up to me and they say, technically they're Canada geese. We don't take ownership of them. When you say Canadian, it makes them sound like we put them there. Now back in the cabin, the flight attendants know that something's wrong. It's so quiet that they're whispering to each other on the jump seat. Sheila, our sea flight attendant, later said it sounded like a library. And the passengers know that something's gone horribly wrong. They've heard and in some cases seen the birds impacting the airplane. There's flames shooting out of the left engine about 50 feet behind the engine because the right engine was completely destroyed. the first stage compressor section was completely stripped of all its blades and it went back through the engine, destroying that engine. The left engine was better, but they managed to have 18 burner cans, and birds had managed to knock 12 of the fuel nozzles out of the burner cans, and they were injecting the gas directly into the exhaust, and it was igniting. Up in the cockpit, I reached for my quick reference handbook. 170 pages. But I got it out. I got it pretty fast, and fortunately, this dual engine failure checklist I had actually done in the simulator as part of my training just 2 weeks before, so I was somewhat familiar with it. But still, I had to find the right page in this 170-page book. And when I find it, this particular procedure is 3 pages long. It's designed to be done at 30,000 feet. Like if you had a fuel exhaustion or injected some volcanic ash. It's not designed to be done at 3,000 feet in 3 minutes time. Still, the cockpit voice recorder says that I was reading the checklist within 20 seconds of our impacting the birds. About 8 months later, I got the opportunity to go over to Toulouse, France, and fly the A380 for a couple hours, that big 4-engine double-decker airliner. And because that's where they make it. And the Airbus check pilots were just, fascinated with the whole thing. They were asking me, they said, we've simulated this so many times in the simulator, we never were able to start as fast or get as far in the checklist as you did in the time you had. And I looked at him and I said, well, I had a reason to be motivated. Sully's calling Mayday, 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 declaring an emergency. Patrick turns us to 220 degrees of heading, which he tells us is a standard heading off of New York. But the important thing for us is that it lined us up with the Hudson River.
Yeah, thank God for that. When he actually said Mayday, 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 I was actually giving him a control instruction to turn left hang 270, turn him on course. So we both actually keyed the mic at the same time. So it was when I unkeyed that I heard the rest of his transmission. And that's why you guys hear it. You hear the, where I say turn left 270, and then you hear him say, it's actually it's 15, I think he said 39. Hit birds, lost thrust in both engines, turn it back to LaGuardia. So it's basic downwind heading. We got 22s, and we got 22 4s, 1331, 220 heading. We can set them up for any runway. So I turned left 220, not realizing, obviously I wasn't thinking that it was going to set them up for the Hudson River southwestbound, which is perfect because that's where the ferry boats were. And just everything went right as far as that went. Prior to this, I think I had probably worked somewhere about 10 to 12 emergencies, and I've always handled them flawlessly. The worst one before this was remember heavy Airbuses. I actually worked in the Newark area for about 3 years. And this heavy Airbus, a foreign pilot. It was a bad weather day. There was a lot of go-arounds. The funnel was stretched out for about 60, 70 miles on this huge arc coming up to 4. And we're right at minimum. So they were starting to make the approach and some weren't. And this one, I don't want to say call somebody, it was a heavy Airbus, comes back around. I'm putting them back in the sequence where in Newark they basically go in the back of the end of the line. And they're flying at 170 knots all the way around. So flying time, I don't know, probably not 30, 40 minutes before he touches down. So he asked me once, he's like, how long is the funnel? So I explained very quickly, because I got a lot of airplanes in my frequency, it's about, you got about 40 flight miles. So how much time is that? And I could hear a little stress in his voice. And I asked him, are you having a fuel issue? He's like, yeah, we're minimum fuel. Now minimum fuel means they can't accept any undue delay before they become an emergency. But I remember from the Avianca incident that sometimes the foreign pilot's understanding of minimum fuel isn't what our understanding of minimum fuel is. To them, they have minimum fuel. So I say, just out of instinct, I asked them, how much fuel do you have? So he goes, we have 20 minutes. Okay, 20 minutes till you divert. He goes, 20 minutes, tank's dry. So I'm like, oh. Okay, well, that changes everything. So I had to cut him across all the traffic, let them speed up to a clean speed so it was more fuel efficient, start pulling guys off funnel, and it was like
4 or 5 planes, and it worked out so beautiful. I wound up losing no space on final, which was I wish I had a replay though. It was like, that was the highlight of my career right there. And I remember he got down, and I was like, whew, wow, that was amazing. But it was one of those things you'll never hear about it. Because the best thing about our job, like when we do our job right, we don't make the papers. That's the idea, you don't make the papers. But in this case, obviously, making the papers was not such a bad thing, because it was the miracle on the Hudson, and it actually showed how well things turn out when everyone works together as a team. So going back to the, turn left at 270, I put him on the 220 heading, and then I went on to coordinate with the tower, because I had to stop departures at that point. I didn't want any other aircraft entering into the scenario that I had going on there. And well, I'll let you pick it up from there and get the cockpit point.
So in the cockpit, I'm resetting a computer to get a proper speed information, which is something you have to do when you got a computer-controlled airplane. Making sure we have electric and hydraulics, because it's a fly-by-wire airplane. If you don't have hydraulics, you're just a missile going into the ground. There's nothing connecting anything in the cockpit to an engine or to a flight control directly. And I'm actually trying to restart these engines, which we didn't know were too heavily damaged to possibly ever restart. Sully's talking about going back to LaGuardia with Patrick, and I can't see it because it's on his side of the airplane and it's behind him. Our only options were to go back to LaGuardia, to land at Teterboro Airport, which is an airport that's out of New Jersey, or the Hudson River. Otherwise, all we're looking at are skyscrapers, roads, and houses. It's obviously extremely congested urban area. Patrick pointed out Teterboro at 2 o'clock to us, and we both looked at it and just didn't think that we could make it. If we had to strike off across land, we'd have to be sure that we could make it. So the Hudson became our choice for landing. It was broad and it's flat, and I never saw any reason why it couldn't work out. But still, while I'm running through my checklist procedure here, trying to restart the engines, I remember just telling myself that this cannot be happening to me. I'm going to wake up from this dream. One of these engines is going to restart, and we're going to be parking back at the gate. What I remember most about that descent to the river was all the noise. We have so many oral alerts in a modern airline cockpit, and virtually every one of them was going off simultaneously. We have ground proximity warning system alerts, and we're getting a whoop whoop pull up call out. We're getting traffic alerts from some helicopter who flew too close to coming up the river, a traffic voice. We're getting a continuous too low gear, too low flap oral call out over our speakers. And the alert bell is sounding continuously as it keeps finding new failures, and they're just overwhelming the monitoring systems. Through all this noise, Sully has the presence of mind to reach back for the public address telephone, which looks just like an old-style telephone and hangs on the back of the center console, pick it up and say, "This is the captain, brace for impact." Now this is actually a signal to the flight attendants to start their emergency procedures. They get into the brace position and they start hollering, "Brace, brace, heads down, stay down. Brace, brace, heads down, stay down," over and over to get the passengers to assume the proper position for a crash landing. Now obviously with this, the passengers know that they're not going to be returning to land. And they handled it in a number of ways. Some of them wrote notes to leave in their shirt pockets. Some of them, a large number of them, texted loved ones on the phones that were supposed to be turned off when they left the gate. One passenger I know still had his text on his phone 2 years later. He showed it to me. He said, "I'll always love you. Say goodbye to the kids." One passenger I know had actually 2 days of bad luck. Just the day before, his wife had been diagnosed with breast cancer, and she's thankfully recovered. But being a spiritual man, he'd made a pact with God. And he told me, he said, "God," he says, if you have to take someone, please take me. So here he is, less than 24 hours later, and he's plummeting to the earth in an engineless airplane, not knowing what the next few seconds of his life will hold. And he told me, he says, all I could think about was, God, I know we made this pact and all, but did it really have to be so soon? Now, up in the cockpit, we have to start slowing the airplane down. We're going too fast, and at this airspeed, we'll just break apart. So we put out our flaps to, we just have flaps 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the Airbus. We put out flaps 2 when we left the gear up. And this got us down to our absolute minimum flying speed of 135 knots, about 150 miles an hour. About 1,000 feet in the air, I know we're not going to be able to restart these engines. They're not even spooling up. They're not doing anything. We're going to have to ditch the airplane. So I start calling out airspeeds and altitudes for Sully to get him situational awareness. Now he needs to land the aircraft with the wings perfectly level so that it won't take a wingtip and cartwheel. But one of the many, many fortunate things that happened that day, I said we had one moment of bad luck followed by 1,000 moments of good luck. But the river was calm. They can actually get swells in the Hudson River. And more amazingly, there were no boats in our way because we didn't have any ability to maneuver around anything. Now, even in moments like this, dire situations, there are moments of levity. About 4 months later, we were asked to go down and listen to cockpit voice recorder tape because they couldn't understand some of the things that we said. We had to listen to our cockpit voice recorder tape over and over and over again. And that's, let me tell you something, listening to your own crash on a cockpit voice recorder tape is a pretty emotional event. But we both heard something that we didn't remember at all from that day. Right before we touched down, Sully asked me, he says, got any other ideas? And I remember at the time I was gazing wistfully off at Newark in the distance because the Newark airport was probably only a couple miles further on. I knew we'd never make it. And I said, actually, no.
Yeah, it was about 7 miles. I pointed that out to you too, but it was a little too late. When you're working in emergency as a controller, normally, under ideal circumstances, you're kind of in charge. You tell them heading, altitude, airspeed. That's the way we work the flow of traffic, but during an emergency, it kind of shifts. The pilot is now in charge, and it's more like you're just helping them out. So my job basically became, what do you need? I will get it for you. And that was my main role. I had other aircraft on my frequency that was still working, but my main focus was dealing with the emergency. And it's funny, you mentioned about how it was extremely noisy. I work in a noisy building. There's 40 controllers working at any given time. They're all barking out orders. And it's just a loud place. I do remember there was a point when it started getting around that this was happening, and this plane was really, really low over the Hudson, that it got really quiet. It was like a deafening silence. And that was a very unnerving feeling. The whole time during the incident, I mean, obviously, when we sounded calm, I know I wasn't. Deep down inside, I wasn't. I could feel my heart pounding. And I mean, you just became so hyper-focused on, okay, what can we do next? What can we do? Okay, that's not going to work. What can we do next? What can we do next? And your mind's racing a mile a minute. But one thing you learn early on in your career is if you portray stress in your voice or you sound flustered, it's a downward spiral for yourself, and it could be a downward spiral for the pilot because you stretch out the pilot. So, having been on fam trips before, I've flown in the cockpit, and I know what their workload is under normal circumstances. I can only imagine what it was for these guys while they were dealing with this whole thing. So I didn't want to overwhelm them. I understand the protocol. We're supposed to get fuel remaining, souls on board, information like that. That was the furthest thing from my mind. It wasn't even an option to ask them for that kind of information. I just wanted to, you tell me what you need, I'm going to get it for you. I remember it really was, for me, I mean, it was, you said that it's, it was just an event for you and it meant a lot more. I think I had a harder time dealing with it for several reasons. One, before this happened, and you might find this hard to believe, but I was a very cocky, arrogant controller. I felt like I could handle anything. I'm much more humble now. I thought no matter what you threw at me, I could handle the situation and I was gonna get it back safe. Well, this is God showing me that, guess what, that's not true. Because they reached a point, I can make everything available to them, but it's now out of my hands. There's nothing I can do except hope everything works out for the best. So after it happened, they quickly got me on position, and this was the traumatic part for me. I honestly, I didn't think they made it. I thought for sure they caught a wingtip, flipped over, and they were looking for maybe survivors. So they kind of shuttled me away, put me into the union office, and they had someone there with me. I'm assuming suicide watch, make sure he's not going to do anything stupid. But he just kind of sat with me, and we didn't say anything. We just kind of just sat there, and I just sat there in disbelief. And that went on for a good 45 minutes before I heard anything. Now, meanwhile, the other controllers that were on break were in the TV room. They're watching this unfold on TV, and they're saying everyone's going to survive. It takes them 45 minutes to realize that, hey, maybe someone should tell Patty that everyone's okay. Really? But come on. I should have been the first to know, but I had no idea. But I remember the guy popping his head in the door. It was kind of a quick thing. Hey, Patty, it looks like everyone's going to make it. And he closed the door. I'm like, wait, what? Did he just say that? At first, it was disbelief. I was like, there's no way. But then, like, the feeling that, it's like a weight off your shoulder. And I tell you, the second worst day, other than that, thinking that everyone was dead, the second worst day, you talk about how it's weird hearing your own voice. I remember when they released, I think it was February 5th, they released the recordings on the news. And at this point, I went a good 2 weeks without sleeping at all. It kept replaying in my head. So I knew, I could do it verbatim if you wanted to. I won't do it, but I could do it verbatim if you want to. So, and it comes on the news, and I kind of obsessed with it. I shouldn't have. The therapist said, you should just not watch any news or anything like that, but I couldn't help it. So I'm watching news and it comes on and they're playing the tapes. And I hear my voice, I'm like, oh my God. It was like the worst, I can't even describe the feeling. My mom calls, she's like, hey, you're on the news, I'm excited. And I was like, yeah, I can't talk. I just couldn't handle it. It's just, it's weird. I became in control not to hear myself in the news, not to be famous or anything. I just wanted to do a job, and that's it.
So I remember it felt like, sinking down into a hole. Because, usually you land an airplane and it's wide open spaces around you. Here we had the skyscrapers and, off of our left in Manhattan and kind of the bluffs of New Jersey off our right. It just seemed odd. The airplane hit really hard on the tail. But then the river just seemed to flow over the airplane. And water cascaded onto the windshield. But then it popped up and it was just bobbing in the waves, the way you saw it in the pictures. I turned to Sully and I said, well, that wasn't so bad. But we lost all electrical power. And Sully had to get up to command the evacuation because he knew that the flight attendants were waiting for him to get on the PA and say, evacuate, evacuate. So he actually went back at that point. I stayed behind to do an evacuation checklist, which is thankfully on the cover of this 170-page book. The very first item is parking brake. Now the flight attendants don't even know that we've landed in the water because we haven't had the opportunity to tell them. But still, when they opened those doors and saw the Hudson River, they changed their commands to don life vests, come this way. Now actually the landing didn't seem that bad in front, but it was pretty severe in the back. The belly of the airplane had ripped out back there and the tail was filling with water. The floor of the rear baggage hold had pushed up through the galley back there, and a structural member had severely gashed Doreen's leg, the B flight attendant in the back. Blood is spurting from her wound, but she doesn't even realize it at this moment. The passengers all rushed to the back of the airplane, but somehow she managed to get them turned around and headed back to the overwing exits. And they were reporting the water was up to their necks in the back. Now by the time I go back, about the first 10 rows of coach or first class and coach are already empty. And people are rapidly exiting the airplane. Now, we all know that some of your fellow travelers aren't always the best and the brightest. But I go into that little hallway that connects the cockpit with the cabin back there, and I'm immediately faced with this 25-year-old guy running up the aisle wearing nothing but a pair of boxer shorts and sweat socks. Keep in mind it's January. It's 20 degrees out there. And I'm thinking, he didn't get on the airplane that way. Apparently he had the idea he was going to swim to shore. So somehow back there he managed to take off all his clothes. I guess we should count ourselves lucky he left the boxer shorts on. But he's already realized the problem with this because he stops in front of me shivering and asks me, what do I do? And I said, go get in the raft. And I told the next 3 people to go sit on that guy to keep him warm. Now I helped the last of the passengers off and went back to about mid-cabin where Sully and I and two passengers were getting life vests and seat cushions and handing them out to the people over the wings. And the water back there was about up to our knees. And it was just freezing cold. Any part of your body that was in that water just ached to the bone. We both started walking on the armrests and the seats just to keep our legs out of the water, but we still had to reach down underneath the seats to get the life vests, because that's where they hang in little pouches underneath the seats. The rear slide rafts were unusable, and the passengers had no choice but to go and stand on the wings in that literally freezing cold water. And the wing was slippery with jet fuel, and some of them were slipping off into the water, and they'd have to be helped back onto the wing. Initially, they were about ankle high in the water. But then, after a while, the left wings, or the right wing started to sink, and the left wing came out of the water. And some people were still standing on the wing in the middle of the Hudson River with the water up to their waists. Now the passengers handled themselves very admirably through all this. There was no pushing, there was no shoving, they helped each other out, but they were, what I call professional passengers. This was a Thursday afternoon commuter flight for business people leaving New York City. There was only one elderly person on board. There were only 2 children. In fact, 8 of them were so unfazed by the whole event that when we got to the ferry dock, they realized that they still weren't home. So they walked right through, went out to the curb, hailed a cab, went back out to LaGuardia, and they were on the next flight out to Charlotte. Now back in the cabin where I am, the airplane's settling in, it's filling up with water, it's getting lower in the water, you can tell that. But it seemed to be pretty stable, and I was not any more than maybe about 20 feet from one of those emergency exit hatches, so I figured if it suddenly decided to sink, I could probably get out somehow. So I wasn't very concerned for my own safety. And we cleared out the whole area of life vests and seat cushions, and after a period of time, and I lost track of all time in this incident, Sully says, Jeff, he says, let's get out of here. So we go up forward and we exit out into the raft. That's the normal raft where you board the airplane. And I remember this odd sense because it was calm in the airplane. It was just Sully and I and these 2 passengers, and we didn't really sense that there was any noise or commotion. And as soon as we walked out of that door, there was just pandemonium going on out on the river. The airplane was already surrounded by boats. And there was a helicopter that was hovering overhead and it was dropping a frogman into the water to help the passengers, who were slipping off the wings and in the water. And I remember the blade wash on this thing was freezing everybody. In our raft were Sully and I, Donna, the A flight attendant, and of course a more than full capacity of passengers, and we were all wet and cold. I managed to cut the tether. There's a rope that actually connects it to the airplane. Cut the tether on the raft, we floated around the nose, and we were all set to get picked up by this nice low boat, that we could have just crawled into right from the raft. But then one of those big tourist passenger ferries decided that he was the one who was going to have to save us. So he comes in, he pushes the other boat out of the way, reverses his engines, comes to a stop right by the raft. And it's like 6 feet up to the deck on this thing. You know, we're sitting on the floor, on the water. And I'm thinking, well, this is just another obstacle. And then a crewman comes out and throws a boarding net over the side. And I remember looking at this thing and thinking, what is this, D-Day? We're supposed to climb up this? I mean, by this point, my hands are absolutely frozen. I can't even move my fingers anymore. They throw a rope down and I'm holding it in my elbow to keep the raft near the boat while the passengers climb up this boarding net. But it didn't seem like too long, and I hear Sully behind me, and he says, Jeff, we better get out of here while we still can. And I look around and I was surprised that the raft was empty. Enough time had passed, I guess. I just didn't, maybe I blanked out there. So we climb up this boarding net. I had to put my whole arms through the little ropes because I couldn't grab them anymore. And there was a crewman who was grabbing our belts and turfing us unceremoniously up onto the deck. So we picked ourselves up, walked into the heated cabin of the boat, and I walked through the door, and there's a passenger there, one of our passengers. He's got one of those flip phones, and he's just flipping it shut. And he looks at me, and he offers me the phone. And I said, oh, maybe I should call somebody. But I thought, who should I call? And I thought, I'll call my wife. Guys, that's a bad move. I dial her with my knuckle. She answers, she says hi, and I said, hi, this is Jeff, and she says hi, and of course I said the only thing I could think of. I said, well, I don't think I'm going to be home tonight, because this was the last day of the trip. And she says, why? And the whole last 20 minutes just sort of spurted out of me. I said, well, we took off from LaGuardia, we hit birds, we flamed out both engines, we ditched the airplane in the Hudson River, we think we got everybody out okay. I gotta go. And I hung up. Sully calls home, but his wife has caller ID. And she's talking to somebody on the phone, and she says, well, it's just Sully. He'll call back later. So then he calls our dispatchers. We have dispatchers in the airline business, and this guy, to his credit, picks up the phone, and he says, I don't have time to talk to you. We have an airplane down in the Hudson. Now, you know, the last 20 minutes have been pretty action-packed, as you might imagine, and with all the shock and the stress and the fact that this boat is rolling pretty good, I'm beginning to feel really sick. But fortunately, it's not long before we touch at the ferry dock. The flight took 5.5 minutes. 2 minutes until we hit the geese, 3.5 minutes to land in the Hudson. It's taken us about 8 times that long just to tell you about it.
Okay, for 15, 20 minutes, 720 northbound.
Okay, it's 15.9, request for the contact on maintain 15,000.
Maintain 1 to 5,000, Cactus 15, 20 minutes.
There probably weren't that many geese.
15.9, Cactus 1539, 8 birds, 2, passenger going back towards LaGuardia.
Okay, you need to return a LaGuardia. Turn left heading up 220.
220.
Copy departure, got emergency returning. It's 15.9. He burned strike, he lost all engine, he lost the thrust in the engine, he's returning immediately.
Cactus 1529, which engines?
He lost thrust in both engines, he said.
Got it.
Cactus 1529, we can get it to you. If you want to try to land 113.
We're unable to remain in the Hudson.
Hi, Cactus 15.9, could be left traffic to runway 31.
Unable.
Okay, what do you need to land? Do you want to try to go to Teterboro?
Yes.
Teterboro, Empire, actually, LaGuardia Park guy, emergency inbound. Hey, guys. Can I get 1529 over the George Washington Bridge? Want to go to the airport right now.
What's going on? Airport check. Does he need assistance?
Yes, it was a bird strike. Can I get him in for runway 1?
Runway 1, that's good.
Can I get 1529, turn right 280, you land runway 1 in Teterboro.
We can't do it.
Okay, which runway would you like at Teterboro?
We're going to be that one.
I'm sorry, say again, Cactus 15.9, radar contact is lost. You also got Newark Airport up at 2 o'clock in about 7 miles. Eagle Flight 4718, turn left thing 210.
4718. I think he said he was going into Hudson.
Cactus 15.9, you saw him?
We were at the ferry dock long enough for the politicians to arrive. Mayor Bloomberg and Governor Patterson came down to hold a press conference on site to tell the world what had happened. And there was an ironic moment where they were holding a press conference. All the press were, of course, wanting to record everything they said, and Sully and I were standing at the back of the crowd wondering what they're going to say. Since, of course, we were the only ones that knew what had happened at that moment. And this is where Governor Patterson coined the phrase, the miracle on the Hudson. But was it really a miracle? I said earlier it was like one moment of bad luck followed by 1,000 moments of good luck, and that's absolutely true. There were so many things that had to go our way. And every second that passed would have created a different set of variables that we would have had to deal with. But for Sully and I, and the flight attendants, and for Patrick, this was an application of a lifetime of training and teamwork. And the same for the boat crews and the first responders. Because in truth, there's not one person responsible for the miracle on the Hudson, there's hundreds. Because if any one person hadn't done their job, the miracle wouldn't have happened. But tonight, Patrick is going to show you the event from the ATC perspective, because somehow he has actually managed to get the ATC tape away from the FAA. When he told me he had it, I said, they gave it to you. And this is something that I have never seen before. So I'm going to set it up while Patrick tells you about it.
Yeah, well, to be honest, this is probably more of a miracle than the actual miracle on the Hudson. It was one of those things, someone asked me to do a presentation, and I'm not a public speaker. This was not something I had any interest in doing. In fact, when I was in school, one of my elective classes was a public speaking class. And after I had to do my first time going up and speaking in front of the class, I quickly dropped the class because I was like, that's not for me. There's no way. I just did not feel comfortable speaking in front of people. But I knew I felt a little obligated in the fact that there was a story to tell, and every time someone asked me to do it, it was always for a good cause. So if something good can come out of my experience just by me telling the story, how can I not do it? How can I say no? So just going up and just talking about it, I didn't know how I was going to handle that. So I asked them, the managers in my facility, if I could have a copy of the replay. And they said, yes. I was like, really? Cool. Did not see that one coming. But talking about when we're talking about calling wives and everything like that, I couldn't even call my wife. I was in a bad place, and I'm sitting there in the union office. And interesting enough, just to give you a little background, just New Year's Eve, the day before, I left work. And I was heading home, and it was one of those ice storms. And I think someone tapped me, but I don't know. Long story short, I lost control of my car, and I wound up hitting a guardrail. I did some damage to my bumper. So 15 days later, this thing happens. She's at work. I want her to know, but I don't want to talk to her. So I sent her a text message. I said, this is the worst worded text message ever. I said, I had a crash. I'm not okay, and I can't talk now. So she called me right away. I didn't answer that.
Sir?
Yeah, please.
118.1 1517, Northwest 337.
Just quickly, this is LaGuardia right there. This is the George Washington Bridge. This is Teterboro. And this goes around. This is going to be Newark Airport. These carrots represent obstructions. That's the Empire State Building. That's ground zero. This is the George Washington Bridge. The stanchions go up to about 600 feet. Where you're looking at, this is Northwest 337. That's his altitude. That's his fix right there. It goes back and forth. It toggles. He's at a 10 something. He's going to gale. That's his airspeed. And this will toggle to his type aircraft. What you said?
1549, 725,000.
This is him now taking off. The target will acquire here shortly. We're departing 4.
Captain 15.9, report to the contact on maintain 15,000. Maintain 15,000, Captain 1549.
In our landing runway, they come across here from the north and come around here for 31. It's called the expressive visual approach. So this is our flow. They depart this way, they're landing this way. And the newer stuff, we work the newer traffic. We take them down this way and then go this way to keep them away from our departure traffic, the newer guys that are going east. And he's climbing very well. I love the way the Airbuses climb out. They actually do pretty good. See, it was a quiet day, which is so unusual. Usually there's like no dead time on the frequency. So I'm going to get this jet link right here as a Embraer jet going to the east. He's going to come this way. The plan is you take him down this way. He gets high enough, you turn him westbound because this is on course. He's going out this gate here.
Every day. Here, John, turning your airport, that's 0. So, 5765, maintain 10,000. 10,000, 2760.
He's climbing well enough now, I feel like I could turn him out the west gate and meet all his altitudes. And so he got up to 34.
Cactus 15.9, turn left lane 270. This is Cactus 1539, 8 birds through Palm Trust, and all people returning back towards the morning. Okay, you need to return a little body. Turn left heading up at 220. 220.
Okay, so that's about 220 down
got emergency returning. Like 15.9, he bird strike, he lost all engine, he lost the thrust in the engine to returning immediately. Cactus 1529, which engines? He lost thrust in both engines, he said. Got it. Cactus 1529, could you get it, please? Do you want to try to land one break? We're unable, we made the Hudson.
13 is this airport, this runway right here. So
Charlie 2760, turn left 070.
I'm still working the other traffic. All right, so this is what I'm looking at this point. 13 is his closest runway. So I'm thinking this is his only option. What you'll see here shortly is these arrivals, because they'll be going opposite directions, start going around. They start climbing, just in case he's going to come in this way. I'm also working this jet link. This guy is going to check on. Where is it? There's another guy out there somewhere. But he's already down to 1,000 feet. The stanchions over here are up to 600 feet. If you think about that, this is him. If you can visualize the Hudson River going this way, this is the way he's going now.
Hijack 15.9, could be left traffic to runway 31. Unable. Okay, what do you need to land?
At this point, we're also coordinating with the final control sitting next to him.
Hijack 15.9, runway 4 is available. Do you want me to left traffic to runway 4? Runway 1, number 2 on right, anything in New Jersey, maybe Teterboro. Okay, you're off your right side is Teterboro Airport.
That's Teterboro right there.
You want to try to go to Teterboro? Teterboro, Empire, actually, we're going to Park Sky Emergency inbound. There you go. Package 15.9 over the George Washington Bridge, wants to go to the airport right now. Going to that airport, check, does he need assistance? Yes, the bird strike, can I get him in for,
Now, interesting enough, I actually did work very few controllers at the Drake on a multi-rail. I happened to work at the Newark area that works Teterboro for 3 years. I had just gone back to LaGuardia for, I think, like a year and a half before the incident happened. So I had worked this airport for 3 years prior. So if anyone had intimate knowledge of how to handle this airport, it was me. Now, the LA you see up there, that's the low altitude alert that's coming on my radar, telling me he's too low. And when I called him, and this is one of the things where you think it's interesting how the mind works. When I called him, I identified myself as Empire. Empire is an arrival feed, because my mind went from departure mode to arrival mode. So that's why I was like, Empire, actually, LaGuardia departure, because I had to correct myself. I was not, really, my position was LaGuardia departure. So.
Runway 1, that's good. Cactus 1529, turn right 280 to land runway 1 in Teterboro. Yes, sir. Okay, which runway would you like at Teterboro? We're going to be that one. I'm sorry, say again, Cactus?
That noise, the ringtone that you heard, the ringtone you heard, because everything was happening so fast, I didn't have time to communicate with Sully and then pass it on to the tower. I actually left the line hot so they could hear my communication. So they would know, as quickly as I knew, what he was doing. That's the benefit of that move, but the downfall is, because you have there's a little background noise when you hit a line, a landline, and you're talking, and someone's talking to you, it's hard to hear. So when he said it was going to be in the Hudson, I was like, I kind of heard him. I didn't want to accept what I heard, but it was kind of hard to hear at the same time. So that dial tone was me hanging up the line at Teterboro and saying, say again? You gonna do what?
Kilo 27, safety contact New York 12618.
That's a good one.
Cactus 15.9, radar contact is lost. You also got Newark Airport up at 2 o'clock in about 7 miles. Eagle 54718, turn left thing 210. 210, 2718. I think he said he's going in the Hudson. Cactus 15.9, keep going.
And that was the worst moment of my life, right there.
Cactus 1529, if you can, you got runway 29 available at Newark, will be 2 o'clock in 7 miles. 854-718, climb 18, 12000. Okay, 12000 and 5, please.
Yeah.
Hey.
And that's pretty much the end of the radar. You want to do the question and answer?
I would like to open it up for some questions and answers at this point, if you'd like. Dick is going to be our roving reporter. He's going to wander amongst you with this wireless microphone.
If anybody has any questions, we'll bring the mic to you. Hold on.
You want to share this?
I've always wondered when passengers are given the instructions to escape the emergency doors, are they able to open those doors, and were they walking out on their own?
Well, that's probably for me.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Were the passengers able to open those emergency doors and walk out on their own?
Yeah, they figured that all out on their own. That's because there's no crew member there to tell them to do that. So they, I know a couple of them said they were trying to. Well, like one guy was saying he was in the brace position with his hands over his head, but he was trying to read the door at the same time, so that he could get the instructions down because he knew he was going to have to open it in a moment.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Is that hooked up? Take any what with you?
Hello?
Oh, luggage.
Maybe we won't worry.
Anyone try and take luggage?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I remember when we were, leaving, or when I was back there getting, the last passenger was getting off, or one of the last passengers, he's got his briefcase, and he looks at me, and I said, no. He says, kind of looks forlornly at it and says, okay. Throws it in the water.
Hey, Jeff, the question was, did anybody try to take their luggage?
Yeah, that's what I said, is that,
Question? Hold on.
Okay.
you were asking where my career is? It's made an about face. I actually just recently, in fact, about 2 months ago, started working for the EAA. So that's the Vice President of Chapters and Youth Education for the EAA. After this accident, Sully and I became co-chairman for their Young Eagles program, which flies 77,000 kids a year from EAA chapters around the country. I'm sure that some people in this audience are quite familiar with it. And that's going to be my future now. I'm technically on a leave of absence from U.S. Air, but they're going to give me a notice here probably in a matter of weeks, telling me I got to come back or quit. And at that point, I'll leave and just continue with this.
So you definitely can't have it.
Well, the airlines have a very robust data tracking program that really actually creates our training programs every year based on the kind of errors that the group is having as a whole. And we also are very good about studying our mistakes and making sure they never happen again. And it's not something that's, obviously because of resources, it's not really followed, in the private flying kind of realm, because obviously you learn how to fly and you don't get a lot of training or really reinforcement after that. And it is something that probably should be tried to model. I actually speak to the medical industry quite a bit about translating our aviation model of safety over to the medical industry, because the major airlines, which actually follow all of our programs that we've developed, the last fatal accident of a major airliner was over 10 years ago in 1991. And if you look back historically, like even back into the 70s and 80s, there were 2 or 3 or 4 airline crashes every single year in this country. So it's been a dramatic turnaround in our safety record that's largely been because of the safety programs that we have developed over the last 20 years or so.
Jeff, I got a question here from John Mulaney. Did the incident initiate any changes in emergency procedures? Is that your question, John?
Didn't initiate any of U.S. Airways. Of course, U.S. Airways banned the incident from being simulated in any of their simulators or for any of their crew members. Every other airline has made it a part of their yearly training program. But the NTSB studies accidents, and they recommend changes to address the causes of those accidents. But the airlines and the FAA are individually responsible for taking those up and heeding those warnings or not. And so every airline is different in what they may have done. They have created a low altitude dual failure engine checklist, which is much shorter than what we had to deal with. I'm sorry? Yes, it was.
Jeff, has the airplane been returned to service?
No, I think it'll never fly again. It's at a museum in Charlotte, North Carolina. Probably some of you remember it took about a week for it to take it over on roads from New Jersey, where it had been sitting in a junkyard for a couple of years anyways, down to Charlotte, North Carolina, and it's now kind of a centerpiece of the Carolinas Aviation Museum down there.
This one is interesting about training. They actually develop a training program for controllers on how to handle bird strikes, and they use me as an example. And I had to take the class now. Believe it or not. They made me take the class. I'm like, really?
What kind of coordination goes on between air traffic control and the first responders in New York, and has that changed as a result of this?
I don't think it's really changed much because of this. Basically what happens is I coordinate with the tower. I yell for the supervisor back up. At that point, now the supervisor's coordinating back and forth with the tower. The tower coordinates with the Port Authority. They handle all the search and rescue. So they were, they're on basically the crash line. There's someone going down the Hudson River. That's why the helicopter was there so quickly. Because once you start this coordination, it spreads like wildfire. Someone's calling someone who's going to call someone, and they're calling two people, and it just goes. It's very efficient. Since 9/11, I think we've really streamlined it, so, and worked effectively that day.
So it wasn't just pure luck, but all those...
Well, the ferry boats, that was pure luck. It just so happened that they were around. But the helicopter being there and everyone else that showed up afterwards, that was due to coordination.
Got one more over here, Jeff.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm curious about everybody else in this room. Did you set the parking brake?
No, I didn't. I suppose I should have. Actually, I got to thinking about that. When the NTSB investigates everything you do,
yeah.
And I thought I should have set it there. Darn it.
If I had one more, I understand that some pilots put in their logbook the flight time from takeoff to back in the chocks. And since in the chocks in this case was alongside the pier, you tried to log 37 hours for that flight?
No, most airline pilots don't even log their time. And I got in the habit a long time ago of logging it by the month. So I logged January 2009, 37.1 hours. It doesn't say anything else in my logbook other than that.
When did you two meet?
Patrick and I?
Yeah, in person.
Congress.
Was that it?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so that was about maybe 6 weeks after the accident?
It's 4 or 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Sometime in February, I think, right?
Yeah, that's right. That is where we met, because I remembered we were all testifying for the House Aviation Subcommittee. So Sully got to talk, I got to talk, the flight attendants chose not to talk. And then here's Patrick, who we didn't know at the time. And he's telling this compelling tale. And I remember, after it was over, and I got in a cab with Sully because we were going over to talk to somebody over in the Senate side. I don't remember who. And Sully said, "Wow, that was something about me, that air traffic controller." And I said, "Yeah, I mean, it shook me up, and I was there."
Yeah, it was weird for me to meet him for the first time. I was in a unique situation. They were already speaking to, they were on talk shows and stuff like that. It literally took an act of Congress for me to be able to speak publicly. It's true, because at the time we were under contract negotiations, and there was a battle going between our union and the FAA. The FAA wanted to, beat their chest and say, "Oh, we want to take all credit for this guy." Union wants to take their credit, and they really couldn't fit in the middle. In the meantime, I was kept silent. So when Congress wanted me to testify, they had no choice. So that was the first time I got to address, which was important to me because you hear everyone speculating about me, that this is what I did, and I was never able to verbalize what I went through, And I remember seeing them come down it was actually the day before we testified, because they kind of take you and they run you through, show you what you're going to do, where you're going to sit and everything like that. I remember seeing them walk down the hallway thinking, God, they're tall. Shit. Couldn't they be short pilots like me? You know?
Are there any more questions? Okay, one more.
Hey, quick question. So Jeff, you and Sully are on the boat, and you just got told that they survived. Finish your day. What happened after that? I mean, from the time you guys went to sleep, where did it go?
Oh, that was quite a story, actually. You know, at the ferry dock, I mean, there had to be more police officers than passengers because they actually were concerned that this was a terrorist incident. And so there are so many different jurisdictions in the New York area. So it was just, crawling with police. And, a couple hours went by, nobody knew what to do with us. Sully finally said, arrest us or let us go. And we actually had one of our pilot representatives showed up. He was actually the rep for, we had a LaGuardia base at the time, and he was one of the reps, and he comes walking in, he's wearing his uniform, with the hat and everything, and I'm thinking, and I thought that, he really knew what he was supposed to be doing, and I'm thinking, thank God there's somebody here, who knows what to do. And he kind of, introduces himself, and then he steps off a couple paces, and he calls up our accident investigation chief, our accident investigation committee, and he says, I got him. What do I do? And the guy was the head of our accident investigation committee, Larry Rooney, says, take him to a hospital. That's the standard thing, take him to a hospital. But there wasn't anything wrong with us, but it's a controlled environment. A hospital is a controlled environment, and people can't get access to you. So that's what they did. They took us to a hospital, and we had to get an interview. They had to take your blood pressure, all this stuff, just to check you in, standard kind of thing. And then we each individually meet with a doctor, and we say there's absolutely nothing wrong with us, and she says, okay. And then to release us, they have to interview us and take our blood pressure and do all this, wheel us out in wheelchairs, even though there's nothing wrong with us. And then some FBI agents took us on a high-speed chase, which we kept telling them, you don't have to do this, a high-speed chase across Manhattan to this hotel that we stayed at near LaGuardia. And that's where we holed up for the next 2 days until Saturday morning. This happened on Thursday. Saturday morning when we gave our NTSB testimony, and then were put on aircraft out of town. What did you do?
For me, well, after I found out everyone was okay, I still had to watch the replay. I had to make a statement. And standard operating procedure, I had to do a drug and alcohol test. So, unfortunately for me, there's only one test.
I forgot about that part.
Yeah.
We did that too.
Yeah, I'm sure you did. We only have one guy for our region. He was upstate New York. So I had to sit there and wait for him 6 hours. It took for him to get there. So I just sat there and checked on him. I just wanted to go home. Drove home. I don't even remember the drive home. I remember getting home. I just sat on the couch. I watched all the media coverage, and there was a ton of it. And I'm looking at all the passengers thinking, oh my God, these people could be dead right now. I was kind of, I had like a little negative twist, like the what if. What if things didn't go right? What if this happens again? So I kind of grappled with that. I just sat there until I attempted to go to sleep.
What did your wife do to you?
You just sat there and held me.
No, that
I know it's sappy.
You know what impressed me most about my wife? I actually drive about 30 minutes, get on a bus, take the bus to Chicago O'Hare, get on a flight, and take the flight to my base. And there'd been this big snowstorm while I was going, and dumped about like 10 inches of snow on my car. And I knew it was love because she came down and brushed off my car.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Thank you very much, Patrick. Big hand. Big hand. Thank you again. Before introducing our incoming president, I'd like to say one thing that caught my attention was the cockpit alert systems in the Airbus. I have the same thing in an Aero. That is fly with my wife. She tells me when I'm going up. She tells me when I'm going down. Thank you, Sonny. All right, Lou Luttrell. It's all yours.